Hey, how are you?
I'm good. Apparently, this morning is the Perth morning or the Western Australia morning because we've got you and Aaron. And then I think we've got Cairo is going to be at like really early tomorrow as well. Yeah, 13:25. Apparently, we like putting Perth people like ridiculously early in the morning. So I make
You're very
apologies now.
seen, yes.
You're very
No,
seen. Yes.
no, it works
But
well, it works well.
I will say Perth is one of my favorite places in terms of B-Sides Perth and the people who organise that and the people who are involved, Nigel and everyone. It's one of my most favorite conferences. So it's definitely worthwhile. But you're going to be talking to us today about a subject that I quite enjoy, which is how do you influence security with no authority, which is quite funny because do any security people really have authority apart from like a CISO maybe? I don't think it's actually a thing in most places. So
I'd even question a CISO, to be honest, on authority point,
yes.
but yeah.
CISO ops versus thank you for the spicy. Yes. CISO versus ops is always the loss. Yeah, he
Do that
created this.
again. Do that again. Oh my gosh. That's probably the best thing that's happened this morning. Oh, thank God. Thank you. Thank you.
So
Spicy.
anytime I come up with a spicy or we come up with a spicy take, the spicy spices will come up.
Is there a spicy rating? I know I'm just completely tangenting
We
here,
can
but do we
we
have
can
like
correct,
that was 3 chilies. Do we have like a 1 to 5 chili
we
spicy
can
rating?
I think he's going to create them now. We could do that, but then we have to like map. Yeah, there we go. We'd have to map them to like habanero or like whatever. Anyway, point being, we're being distracted from your amazing talk, Sam. So let me bring up the slides, which apparently you said that you had more slides just to fit in more memes. So I'm looking forward to this. But we will disappear and let you speak.
All right, thank you. All right, well, firstly, thanks for having me. And this is the only second run through of this talk, so it's still a work in progress, I guess. And as the topic says, influencing security with no authority. There's a trick part to that later on, and you'll find out shortly. Now, the obligatory who am I slide, I don't really like doing these, didn't really want to do it, but I figured I should because I haven't talked to anybody before, so everyone will be saying, who's this guy? So me, Sam Hitchiner, principal consultant in security working at Insight in Perth. Already covered that. Been doing that role for the last 3 years. Why? Still figuring it out. And how? Well, mainly through challenges and extreme stubbornness is how I've gotten this far, and it's probably going to take me a lot further. But as a bonus, being connoisseur, so I've tried to put as many of those into the slides as possible. I particularly like this one about security theatre, so it's where the risks are made up and the scores don't matter. Alrighty. So some of the key things I wanted to cover off first of all is the topic is pretty straightforward, but I like to be very clear on the words that I'm using because it's part of being effective at communicating. So I wanted to break down my definition of security and influence. For me, security is the state of being free from harm. It's often analogous with safety, so you would often hear that. You can use those approaches interchangeably, and it is a people problem. It is definitely not technology, our favorite one, 100% attainable, and not compliance. So that's just my take and my definition of it. And what influence is, it's about affecting change. Apparently has roots in the Latin word influre, which means to flow into, but they're mainly talking about fluids, so it's evolved over time. And it's applicable to people specifically. So you can see the correlation. Security, people problem, influence, applicable to people. It's not social media influencers. And I know Ian loves to be a security influencer on LinkedIn. It's his favorite title. It's not about you. It's not about me. And it's not explicitly facts and figures. So a lot of the times that's the leading argument for influencing someone. Look at these numbers. Doesn't really talk to the person. And another common challenge I run into is that people assume influence is persuasion. Persuasion is, for me, a component of it. But it's very, like these two definitions talk about, the key points and difference is that persuasion is usually very targeted, very specific, and focused on the message and the source. Whereas influence is often passive and it can be very indirect and subtle, sometimes unintentional. You can unintentionally influence someone the wrong way, that you have to be mindful of, but it is very dependent on the relationship and the context. So I did a rough idea of like a decision tree or a process flow, whatever you want to call it, along the bottom there to call out and visualize that difference. So you can overlay this to anything situation you can think of and recall from event, initial review, decision to address, define the need, engage, execute, finalize, operate, and manage. Influences across all of that. Whereas persuasion can be just key decision points in that flow. So that's a visual way of discerning the difference. And the last definition piece before I get into the tips and tricks aspect, authority. Now, the authority part is a bit of a play on words because I love doing that in alignment with memes. So the definition of authority is the power to or right to give orders, make decisions, and enforce obedience. It can be derived from different sources such as law, tradition, hierarchy, or consent. Now, there's another aspect to that, which is being a subject matter authority or authority in your domain. Now, the reason I'm highlighting that is that some people say, but I'm an authority in my area. It's like, yes, but authority is given, not self-assigned. So when you start those conversations, you technically have no authority in the eyes of your audience. So that's the key point that I wanted to highlight. And you can build that authority in your domain at the same time as you try and influence the security for your audience. So that's the key difference that I saw on that one. Okay, that's enough of the definitions. At least you understand where I'm coming from what I'm trying to cover off here. And now we get to the fun part. What do we need? Now, I scratched my head a lot on this one, and it took me far too long to do that the pretty little picture, so please appreciate it. Oh, and the meme. But this is not a framework and it's not a model because I have a personal aversion to anything like that. This is just my thoughts put in two-dimensional format to make it easy enough to communicate. It will be adjustable for you if you need to, but you're welcome to use it or muck around with it if you like. For me, at the core, influence has the three main aspects. So your security knowledge or your area of knowledge doesn't have to be specific to security, but that's what this influencing is about. So you could sub that out for any other topic area. There's the context, and then there's your character. So if we look at those layers, there's layers below those three areas. Security knowledge, we're talking about risks, solutions, and governance. You can chop and change those around accordingly, but they should be the key areas that you're going to be trying to influence on. You have to talk from a point of knowledge and experience. Otherwise, you're influencing without that, and I would put you in the category of social media influencers and if you're trying to do that. For character, for me personally, I find empathy, honesty, and integrity are the most critical traits. It's very hard to understand from people's perspective without an empathic approach. Your integrity and your honesty build off each other. And if you join those with the context, so in this case, I'm talking about the environment context, the people context, the business context, those two facets together of context and character build trust. As you can see, the call outs, the knowledge and the character together build your demonstrable capability. It's showing through evidenced historic effort and ongoing effort with them, your capability. And then your context knowledge and your security knowledge allows you to align outcomes. So there's no point pushing something that's misaligned. You're just sending everyone down the wrong path. Sorry, I keep looking off to the side. That messages are distracting. So that's what I would start with to what you need to take into these conversations. So if you don't have a sufficient cover of those three main areas, it may be better to look to redress those first. Then you come into how. So as I mentioned, persuasion is a subset of influence. There's a lot of books around there's 6 methods of persuasion from the Influence book. Now, I selectively chose not to recommend 2 of them because you'll see on that list on the left there's I can never say that word, reciprocity, or give and receive. Consistency and commitment, talks a bit to what I mentioned on the previous slide. Social proof, I love that one. It's just like, what's everyone else doing? Familiarity, that for me is a real key one, because if I can correlate what I'm talking to into the audience and the business's context, it's automatically familiar for them, even if they don't know the security components of it. So talking their language effectively. The two that I omitted, because people have asked, what did you omit, was authority. We touched that as the topic, and scarcity. Now, I omitted scarcity for this pure reason that is a fear-driven, a negative emotional trigger saying you're missing out. It's FOMO, and it's not one that I would recommend. So you got your character elements, and again, this is down to your character, the way you work. So it's very deeply personal to the way you like to communicate, the way you like to operate. For me personally, I focus on communication. I think that should be universal, because obviously you can't communicate, you can't share a message if you can't talk about it. But stoicism for me is a preferred character element, because that way it helps you frame, control what you can, don't worry about what you can't. And that really helps keep focus and put the energy where it can do you the best good, rather than trying to just spread it liberally, that it may not have any return for you. And the influencing elements, which are more subtle and universal across the topic that you're trying to push with the audience, these are going back to the original correlation of the three core aspects. So building trust with your character and context, align outcomes with your security knowledge and the awareness of the context, demonstrate your capability and security knowledge and character. So those are the high level, this is how. Influencer. Okay, thanks for the message. And then the when. So to be honest, for me, it's whenever you can. It really is, respectfully, whenever you can. There's so many opportunities that you can influence a security uplift objective, and it can be very narrowly specific, or it can be very broad. I recommend broad because this is a passive and subtle approach. You would be very specific if you're trying to persuade. So for me, leveraging situational opportunities, I have had so much traction from situational opportunities where casual conversation, people asking about something completely irrelevant. Another good example is when people are asking about their personal security. How do I manage passwords? So we've probably all had that question. And for me, helping the individual in their personal life helps the business, because if they do it at home, they'll do it at work, and vice versa in some cases. So if you enable someone to be more secure in the way they work at home or the way they run their life, because everyone has homes to administer and accounts to manage, etc., then they'll naturally do that as their default when they come and work in your business. So it's an inherent benefit. And even thinking about those individuals in their career, their future employers will thank you. Maybe not directly, but think of it as being thanked. Ad hoc requests and conversations, that's what I've just talked about here, but also investing the time to engage people broadly across the business. If you're an external consultant or you're an internal resource, being able to engage as broadly as you can. And like the fourth example I've given there, talking to people that you normally wouldn't talk to. For me, huge benefit from talking to marketing. Like, why would a security professional want to talk to marketing? It's because they do this for a living. Their job is to influence. So you don't need to reinvent the wheel, just leverage their ability. Staying aware of the business changes to proactively offer input has been hugely beneficial as well, where you can look to be involved and be aware of what the business is doing. It's some of its strategic decisions. If they're ASX listed, they obviously have to announce certain things that can give you a heads up, even though the business may not want you to have it. They legally are obliged to announce certain things. So that is another way to keep informed. If you don't have a effective information flow internally, you can look at it from an external source. and bring it back in and try and drive that information flow by having those relationships established. So you get advised and informed, and it builds on that trust and that engagement, because instead of you having to go to them, they start coming to you. You can ask to be informed. You can highlight why you being informed on these types of things would be beneficial, but it's always about not communicating with that age-old fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the favorite FUD aspect. It seems so obvious to use that model because people react instantaneously to fear and anything negative connotation, but it also associates that view with you. So you get that whole, oh no, here's Sam again, he's going to come and tell me something bad. I usually don't have any good news, but I don't want to make it in a bad light. So there's plenty of other options there, and I would like to talk to anyone else that has any examples or experiences. I could rattle on for a bit on some of these, but I don't want to go too far into it. But I think some other areas that I've had people mention to me was what they do when they're a fresh starter in a business. So they're internal. They've just started. They may be junior. And they thought, well, I have obviously no authority. I don't really understand the business, how it operates. The key players don't have the context. So you're starting from ground zero. And my recommendation to them was take that as a beneficial lens. You can play I'm a fresh set of eyes. Would you like my feedback on something? I did the induction training and I found these items confusing, or I don't understand where they align to our business policies or anything to that effect, because a fresh set of eyes view can be very beneficial, and it's often more acceptable to bring that conversation forward as I don't know anything about this. I'd love to understand why this is the case. You get basically a free pass to challenge that common response we've probably all heard. It's the way we've always done it. Well, there's a great opportunity to have the time to challenge that one, which I thought was really beneficial. As I changed through roles, because no one can judge you on it. You're new. All right. Now, for the next piece, the key thing for me is like, well, what's the point? Why do we want to try and influence security objectives? And I've kept this very generic as far as security objectives are unique to each organization. You can't purely say it's to save money or to be secure. So you would want to have an end goal in mind. Now, for me, this is my view of an end goal as to how I would measure success of influencing a business or an organization's security. Firstly would be the security considerations default, not an afterthought. So they would be thinking about these without me needing to be involved. That would be Valhalla, the ultimate for me. Business and people are informed and aware of their security needs and can manage to drive it accordingly. Now, that's often a double-edged sword. I don't need them to know how to do my job. I just need them to know enough about what their job needs of it. So what security aspects does their job need to have awareness of, and they should have that. Ultimately, the great outcome for me would be you'd become a trusted advisor, and you'd only be there to guide and inform. You don't need to mandate or dictate things to the business organization. They would be asking you to inform that for them to manage it themselves. Knowledge is distributed according to the role and position. So that goes back to the previous point I made, where you don't want to over-inform. So many organizations I see have some really exhaustive training material or security awareness training. It's like a buzzword and a pain point for me personally, that tells people things they don't need to know. They can't use it, they can't benefit from it, and it leaves a sour taste in their mouth about the rest of the content. So there may be some real gems in there that would be brilliant for them to have as takeaways, yet it gets thrown out with the bathwater effectively, is lost. So the security benefits to the next point, they are clear and transparent to stakeholders. So that's often been a very big challenge, I find, because everyone's looking for their, ROSI, return on security investment. Well, the easiest way I answer that is, what's the return on exercise? What's the return on eating healthy? What's the return on seeing your GP regular? And immediate return? Nothing. That's the truth of it. There's nothing. Long-term, health and well-being. Security is the same. Don't see an immediate return. It's hard to articulate an immediate, tangible, measurable return on investment. You can definitely get a tangible detail of cost, but if you're trying to turn that back to it saved us X or it mitigated Y, that's a very slippery slope. So I try to align it back to that health parallel, health and safety. Simplicity is key focus for solutions initiatives. Now, most people think, oh, of course it is, but it's amazing how fast things get complex. And there's that fun statement, complexity is the enemy of security. It's not necessarily, but some things do need to be complex. Aim for a way of making it as simple as possible, that it can be decompressed into something much more simpler in smaller context, smaller manageable bites, and that way you don't have to really go through the weeds to get the outcomes you're after. And the last one would be proactive risk management. So everyone says, oh, it's all risk management, but proactive risk management for me, risk management should be proactive, in my opinion. It's about things that may happen, not are happening. Anything that is happening is reactionary. Risk management should be only proactive. So thinking ahead, planning ahead, being aware of the potentials. You're not going to get it right because nobody has, but it's a lot better to have the people that are at that phase, so very early in a process, like I mentioned prior, if they're aware that this activity, whatever it is the business is planning to do, has security implications, and they know that, you're already off to a great start for managing the risks of that activity, because they will hopefully be asking you or have process in place already to plan and address that and remediate it. Working as a consultant, we run that challenge often because, as you can imagine, consultants tend to be brought in to just do a thing. We just brought you in to do a thing. So, great. Have you considered? And that's the can of worms conversation that I usually start with. And often it's not considered. And if anyone's ever responded to an RFP, you would imagine the amount of times it has, this response must comply with shopping list of obligations. Yet nobody can tell me what that means for your engagement. So that can be a fun little conversation for breaking down what you're really needing to do at that time. And in some cases, it's turned it into, let's go back to the drawing board and talk about this first, because the initial thoughts around this engagement has been purely on solution and not on the implications from a security perspective, from the broader business perspective. And that has often yielded much better results, and in a lot of cases, a more efficient and cheaper for the client engagement, because those things are not left to the end, which we know is usually the most expensive time to try and address something. All right, so that is actually towards the very end of my talk. Now, I can ramble on some more, or I can talk to Shara as well as you like. I probably went through it a little bit too quick, but I do have some other scenarios, but I think I'll wait for the overlords to step in, because I know they love to backfill time.
I mean, I don't want to talk to you anymore because you think I'm an influencer. So, like...
Influenza, apparently.
How rude. I like to be the antithesis of an influencer, not the actual influencer.
Is that like an anti-hero?
I think that was a great talk. We had a lot of people talking about that this was really awesome advice in the chat room. A couple of comments about the don't over-inform advice. I find that's always a problem, like getting the balance between what do you need to know and what don't you need to know, because some people, when they get information, it's that whole they know enough to be dangerous kind of thing. Like, you want to give them as much information as they need, but the problem is, like, sometimes that's the wrong thing to do if you want a long-term success.
It's been a challenge, and you can see it from a business's lens that we want to save money. So most businesses' core success criteria is reduce cost, increase profit, unless you're a not-for-profit. And when they have that model, it's all about optimization, standardization, and let's throw another ization in there, unification. So they're trying to push those views on security training, for example, awareness, informing, compliance, and it doesn't work, because what your accounts payable person needs to know versus, say, your talent acquisition team need to know, it's so different.
And it's about trusting people to do the right thing with like, you can't do everything, so you need to hand some of that off with the information they require, kind of thing.
I've always had the view, that I don't know the most secure way of doing your job. You do. I'm just there to help with the things you may not be aware of.
Here are the guardrails. You need to translate that into something that makes sense for you.
Yeah. And it's so many places like to just mandate. It's like, you must do this, you must not do that. It's like, that's wonderful, but they also need to do their job.
And that is very hard to do, to be across all those things at once. Yeah. Anything from you, Shanna?
No, just exactly and it flows on really well from the last talk in terms of security, return on investment and the true costs and things like that. So I'm in complete agreement with pretty much everything you said. And I did miss the call for me to ask Ryan his favorite potato, so I'm going to ask you now, Sam, what's your favorite potato?
Well, I've been primed for the question, so I've had time to think about it, and it was very important to me. So we don't
prime. That involves planning. That's not a thing we do.
Yeah. Next speaker is not going to get asked about potatoes, just FYI.
Ask them about a fruit. No, I think it was like a memory. It's like memory prompt, most memorable potato-related meal, and the first thing that was surfaced was cream cheese and bacon potato bake.
Oh, yes.
And
I was like, that's me right there.
So it is a little bit. I sent Ian a reel from Instagram where they made smashed potato, what are they called? The little potato gems in a muffin tray where you smash the potato gems in, and then you add like bacon and sour cream and cheese and chives and stuff, and you make these little like muffins of potato gems with, your bacon and cream cheese. So maybe something that you could give a go as well.
Legitimately, our entire conversation with each other is just full of potatoes. Like, we live potatoes, apparently.
Hey, look, WA has an excess of potatoes. We've got to get them consumed.
We'll come visit and just
make vodka.
Make vodka.
Now, there's also a good idea. The universal food. Hey, look, it saved the Irish during the famine. You can't
preservation. I mean, it lasts for years, right?
I've got so many of them just going to seed in my cupboard. It's like, I've got potatoes that want to live.
They want to be reborn into some new form.
And if you let them go in your garden, that's it. You have potatoes forever. You cannot get rid of them.
Not a bad thing.
The next person.
All right,
Thank you very much, Sam. That was a great chat. And lots of